Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this critically important and hopefully very exciting topic. My name is Mamello. Mamello SELAMOLELA. I'm a partner at BCG, and I'm joined today by one of the leading figures in AI in Africa, Kate Kallot, and head of Google.
Wow.
It was not meant to be a recruiting move. The head of BCG.
She wants me to be at BCG.
I can tell. The head of Google in Africa, apologies, Alex. Head of Google in Africa, Alex OKOSI. Welcome, and I'm looking forward to a really insightful conversation. I think we all understand that AI is shaping all aspects of societies and economies, and with new capabilities like generative AI really accelerating this impact exponentially. If we consider, however, that generative AI, as disruptive as it has been, is really just an infant relative to its ultimate maturity. So one can hardly fathom, really, the scale and speed of its impact over the next 5 to 10 years. So it is in this context, ladies and gentlemen, that we explore the question, can Africa become a champion of AI? How can Africa secure its position, not only as a credible player in this space, but potentially as a global powerhouse in the coming decades? Kate, I'm going to start with you, and maybe let's address the elephant in the room, which is, do you really believe that Africa has the potential to become a global AI hub? And if so, what drives that confidence?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. The short answer is I do. And you know, I've been in this field for the past 10 years, and there is a reason about how we came here and how AI came back at the forefront of the conversation since last year with ChatGPT. You know, we got to this point because of a couple of things. A very simple formula: advancements in compute and R&D. The talent, but also research has been like moving at speed of light. And I think today, if we consider these three things, we don't need to build chips in Africa. We have two things that we have in abundance: the use, very, very technically savvy use, and then the second thing is an abundance of problems to solve. So these two things make me believe that we can become a leader in AI. And you know, when I was still sitting in the US and working for big tech, I've always been amazed by the abundance of youth already congregating to solve data science and machine learning problems in Africa. You have communities today like Zindi, where you have hundreds of thousands of data scientists that congregate all year round to build solutions for their communities and their country. That in itself is already a treasure that we need to consider and enable and foster if we really want to make the leap forward. And I think maybe one of the things I would also want to mention is we have to stay true to our reality. You know, you mentioned generative AI, which is still extremely nascent. I want to remind everybody that there are 180 million users on ChatGPT, but there are still 2.6 billion people today that are unconnected. And I'm calling it a reality and not a challenge because I think it can be an opportunity for us. An opportunity to leapfrog. We're not being hampered by generations and generations of technology infrastructure that needs to be updated to transition, but also an opportunity to build solutions that look like us and understand our context, understand our challenges, if we enable the use, because they live this reality every day.
I really enjoy your framing of the abundance of challenges as a real opportunity that gives us something to really work with. Alex, how do you see this AI revolution as an opportunity for Africa, and maybe what are some of the potential risks?
Look, I like to sort of skew on the size of the opportunity versus the size of the risk. And I would like to say, also even flip it even further to say there's an abundance of opportunities for us to capture. Because I think whenever we frame the challenges, which is real, right? People oftentimes focus on what the challenge is. Look, as Google, we've been an AI company for some time. I think, you know, in a lot of ways, a lot of our products and services are built on AI. We look at the tremendous opportunity that Africa has in a whole bunch of different areas. But first of all, it's trying to just, how do you actually size this, right? Because I think it's going to be much harder for me as a Google person to say to you, hey, this is what the size is. Access Partnerships did a white paper on terms of just now, just the nascent sort of AI revolution that we're still on, just that period that between Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, over the next 3 years, it could contribute $136 billion in terms of economic activity, right? Now, some people predict that by 2035, it can actually double Africa's GDP if we harness the power of AI in the right way. And again, as we talked about, as we started with, the idea of some of the societal challenges we have, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in, in food security, these are some of the things that there's already work going on, leveraging AI to be able to solve. As Google, one of the things that I take pride in is that we opened our AI research center in Accra back in 2018, and I've been doing some fundamental work there, which I can talk about a little bit later. And we've also now extended it to East Africa and Kenya, again, to be foundational in being able to do this work. Of course, there's going to be the focus of, what are some of the negatives that can come from AI, but I think the opportunity outweighs the negatives of misinformation. Yeah, there's cybersecurity threats potentially. Yes, there's the idea that people can in a lot of ways really misuse AI. But I think that the opportunities in terms of the problems that it can solve, but more importantly, the opportunities that it can create, especially, think about what you just said. What people don't understand is that a third of the youth population in the world, not by 2050, will be from this continent in 2030. Now, the young people that I know, and trust me, I've been in the business of young people for a really long time on this continent, are incredibly vibrant. They are going to capture those skills. But AI also enables us to bridge the gap in education that a lot of young people have today, in that there is going to be opportunities for them to be able to grasp into information at a much faster rate and leverage that information and learning to be able to create products and initiatives that are going to be able to drive this continent's growth. So for me, it's just a tremendous opportunity that we have, but we need to continue to make sure that we work with governments to put in place the right frameworks and right regulations that is an enabler of AI growth versus hampering it. But I think that's one of the things that we're excited to continue to be able to do with other entities as well.
Yeah, and I think this conversation around an abundance of opportunities, I want to just jump to talk about some of those a little bit. I think we've all seen how AI has applications pervasively and touching every corner of our lives. But it's also clear that no country or region can hold a significant global advantage across all sectors, and that at some point countries and regions may have to focus on a few big bets. Kate, what are some of the unique challenges, opportunities, and use cases that are emerging as opportunities for AI to develop, or for Africans to use AI to develop uniquely African solutions?
So I'm going to start with the challenges, and then I'm going to move towards the applications. There are two things that I see as challenges that are still hampering us to harness that potential today. I think the first one is the compute divide. A lot of the compute infrastructure necessary to build AI systems still sits quite predominantly in the global north. The second one is the data gap. You can't actually build any AI systems if you don't have good data, and data that's representative of your people, right? I come from Central African Republic. I love giving this little anecdote where I asked ChatGPT what the country's national dish was, and it responded to me poulet nyembwe, which is actually Gabon's national dish.
Yeah, you have to switch to Gemini.
We will. If you have our data, then.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
But what does this show you, really? It just shows that a lot of the systems are not built for us, right? It doesn't take in account the uniqueness of our cultures. It doesn't take in account the uniqueness of our countries. So we have to go about solving that. And I think when you think about infrastructure, before, building critical infrastructure meant building a road, building a hospital. But today, building critical infrastructure can also mean having access to power, connectivity, and compute infrastructure for your ecosystem to thrive and build the solutions for your country. Developers, startups will use that infrastructure to build solutions, but it also means having data and moving an entire continent from analog to digital. You know, we didn't wake up and thought we will build a climate tech company for Africa, an AI climate tech company for Africa. We actually stumbled upon that because we wanted to build AI solution. I'm a data scientist, like, oh, we're going to build models, it's going to be great. Actually, there's no data. What do we do now? So we realized that we actually needed to like become plumbers of Africa and build the necessary pipes. If the data is water and I need to provide clean, accessible, affordable water to all the developers on the continent, I need to become a plumber and build those pipes. Take that unstructured water, dirty water, transform it, clean it, and provide it to others to drink. And that's what we've been doing. We've been supporting governments to digitize data they haven't digitized before, and also putting out the data sets for other developers to build. And that's how you create an ecosystem. I truly think that today, if we manage to do that, at the country level, at the regional level, at the continental level, there's no shortage of applications. We're not going to talk about agri-tech, climate tech, healthcare, finance. We're going to be seeing innovation across all these verticals. And that's what's going to be turbocharging really AI innovation on the continent.
I think that's an interesting one, and maybe, Alex, you can reflect on this idea that left to its own devices, the market will move to where the money is. The market will move to where there's significant scale and market size and so on. And so you do need the case of this world who say, we will build it for Africa as Africans so that it solves what we need to do. But this again cannot be done unilaterally. And maybe your perspective here, Alex, on how governments can really take the lead in positioning Africa to reap these benefits that Kate is articulating here, and maybe how private sector can come alongside government to really make that leap.
Look, I think, you know, it has to be a team sport with everyone involved, right? And it has to be sort of everyone in the same team, in a lot of ways, for Africa to win. And that does mean it's not just about us as Google with Gemini. It's also other players, whether it's Adobe, whether it's Microsoft, but us partnering together with civil society, with government, with academia, to make sure that we have the right frameworks in place that enables AI, right? So when you look at it, you talked about earlier, from how do we make sure that we have relevant data and that governments also are leaned into that effort? So how do you make sure that, as of today, right now, to be able to build some of these solutions across our countries, we need governments to be able to also move to cloud-first technologies, right? That enables us to then be able to have data available that you can actually process as part of machine learning, to now be able to output the solutions to be able to solve for some of these challenges and to also accelerate growth. So those are some of the things that need to happen. So that partnership with government, ensuring that they see private sector as a partner to understand where the gaps are, is critical. We as tech companies also don't want to have, you know, AI misused in any way, because it compromises the ability that we also have to be able to serve the communities that we want to serve through our products. So I think that's what's really critical about this. But I do believe that it is so important that we don't miss, as Africa, the transformational power that we can get out of technology. It does require investment, you know, which again, not to promote Google, but really I'm proud of what we do. Like, I literally love my work because I believe that in every single value chain to make AI work and to make technology help with that divide, to get, you know, bridge that gap and that divide to accelerate growth in Africa, we're in. You got to invest in infrastructure, right? So undersea cables, Equiano is critical to some of that effort that we invested in. You got to invest in skilling, making sure that as you are, you know, the startups are going to be the ones that are going to be using AI to accelerate our growth. I love the fact that we've trained over 6 million people in digital skills over the last 6 years. That's important. We've also supported over 100 startups over the last 2 years in terms of our accelerator program. So those are some of the things that are critical to being able to make sure that you're able to leverage AI. Launching the cloud region, right? As you mentioned, being able to make sure that you have data centers on the ground. Us launching the cloud region now in South Africa is critical to that effort. So for me, it's really, it's a no-brainer that for us as Africa to be able to, again, leapfrog and get in front and really have our workforce, our young people be the workforce of the world. AI has to be something that we adopt in a huge way.
And in fact, I think your last point there, Alex, is a good segue to what I'd like to explore next. Earlier, you talked about if, right? And there are a number of those ifs that need to come together. And one of the most important ones is around talent. We know that, and you've mentioned this, Africa has an amazing asset in terms of both the size and the growth of the young population. And that can really enter the workforce and give us a global edge. However, most of these young people today, back to our reality, are undereducated and ill-equipped for the economy of today, much less an AI-powered economy of the future. So your thoughts, and I'm also going to ask Kate for you to weigh in on this. How can we significantly ramp up our ability to produce the talent that we need for AI leadership at scale, at speed, and at the right depth with the right technical leadership, all-round skills to really allow us to have sufficient talent for our own needs, but potentially even become a net exporter of talent, AI talent for the world?
Look, I think is a public and a private effort, right? So from a public perspective, we need to make sure we revamp our educational systems in a lot of ways. And it's not going to be easy, but we're going to be forced to, because as you mentioned, the jobs of today and tomorrow are not going to be the traditional educations that we come from. However, I still believe personally that STEM is a critical foundation to being able to actually take advantage of the AI revolution. So we need to make sure that that's what's being emphasized in a lot of our institutions.
Yeah.
But also vocational training that doesn't require you to have gone to school for however many years to get a degree is also critical. And I think that's the power of AI and the information that you can get and how you can train yourself. It's not just necessarily about sitting in a classroom traditionally and getting that education. There's other ways in which you can, from an e-learning perspective, understand what are the gaps and what are the trainings and qualifications that you can get to be able to play in this AI environment. It doesn't mean that to be able to leverage AI, I must be an engineer to be able to propel. Because again, a lot of the startups that we're going to create are not necessarily going to be in the engineering space, but it's that AI is going to enable them to be able to scale faster and be able to help them to be able to compete better in this space because they are leveraging the latest information and technology to be able to do so. So that's how I see it. I think that's kind of where I think is really important for private institutions like us to also be in the business of training. Yeah. And when I talked earlier about what we do to make sure that we're, from a digital skills perspective, from investing in the ecosystem, from having a startup fund, that we give equity free to people to be able to sort of start their businesses, that we continue to do that, because it's not just a good thing to do, it's the business enabling thing to do for the future and for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said, and I think even if we've had a similar view on that question. There's this misconception that our youth is not actually AI or machine learning savvy, and I think that comes from biases that we've built across the year, right? In reality, they are, and a lot of them don't learn through university, they learn through non-traditional pathway institutions. Think bootcamp, hackathon, learning by watching YouTube videos, very rudimentary, but that gives them at least an understanding of the technology and gets them to becoming practitioners. So for me, I think we have to deconstruct and reconstruct the way we're thinking about training talent and enabling youth. If I tell you my head of data science is 26 years old, and half of my engineering team is about 26, 25, you wouldn't think that they could be responsible of such a big mission.
Yeah.
Yet they have the skills to be working for NVIDIA. Let me tell you, we were trying to hire them, right? So, but it's just that the misconception is you have to have 10 years of practice in big tech company to be legitimate to actually be an AI practitioner or a machine learning engineer at the highest level of talent. The truth is, you don't.
You don't.
You have to understand the skills. You have to be willing to learn, right? And learn through all the means that are available to you as a young person in Africa. And you also have to seize the opportunities that are in front of you. And the only thing that we had to do with our team is supporting them to build that like large enterprise software grade shipping. But these are all soft skills. They're not hard skills. They wanted to solve the problems. They had the technical skills. They were the best people to do the job. And they, more importantly, they understood the context of Africa.
Yeah.
And I think this is a bias that and a misconception we've built outside, and we have to start rethinking. We need to start disconstructing and rethinking about how we enable those youth. And I think what you're doing with startups is also important, you know, because a lot of the bias is like, if you want to be an AI startup, you have to be building a new large language model coming out of a research lab in California. Truth is, you don't, because a lot of these don't have use cases here. You just need to understand your context and include a lot of your surroundings, whether your country, your community, your environment, into each and every steps of the technology you're building. And we need investors to support, understand that, and support locally built solutions.
You know, when I think about the skills element of this conversation, you know, I always think about it in terms of at speed, right? So you can't afford to have to rely on people doing 8 years to a PhD, all right? We have to think at scale, and so the cost has to be reasonable, and we have to think about depth, which is what you're saying around how quickly people can learn at the right depth that you can bring them in and actually have them be productive. And I really, and it's interesting for me how AI itself democratizes access to itself, and that's very interesting. So maybe one other if, and it's probably the last one we'll talk about today. Advancements in AI clearly can lead to new opportunities, and we've spoken about that extensively. But these advancements also pose some risks to people and their human rights. So regulation is another if that we need to get right in order to create environments that promote the benefits of AI, while ensuring that its use is ethical, it's inclusive, it's responsible. Now, we've seen some governments on the continent really being front foot forward. Rwanda, Egypt, and Mauritius were the first countries on the continent to develop their national AI strategies. Kenya, Nigeria, Tunisia, South Africa, Ghana, and Zambia are currently in the process of doing so. Kate, you've been in the space for quite a long time. What are some of the most important considerations that you believe governments and regulators need to incorporate to ensure that we fully capture the opportunity, like I said, in the most ethical, responsible, and inclusive way for the continent?
Yeah, there's one thing I always tell government when I interact with them on the questions of regulations is that just like you can't build and train an AI system in Europe, US, or China and expect it to work in Africa, you can't just copy-paste regulations.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like this, right? You can't copy-paste regulations. And I think you have to understand, the first thing you have to understand how AI innovation is driven within your own country, because it's driven differently across the entire world. In the US, it's big tech. In Europe, it's regulations like GDPR. In China, for example, the government is investing heavily into startups to create a local industry. In Africa, it's actually grassroots.
Democratized.
Yes, it's democratized, it's grassroots, it's bottoms up, it's startups, it's developers. So you have to understand what is already happening in your country, in your community, and then you have to put these actors and give them a seat at the table, because they can walk the walk with you as government. We don't need you to understand exactly what that technology does or all the challenges, the risk. We can make this work with you and take you along the journey and educate you. But you have to change the way about how you've been thinking about those regulations and give a seat at the table to the people who are actually the practitioners in your country. And if you do that, if you create that ecosystem, let me tell you, you invest in compute, you digitize your data, you support your local developer ecosystem, you put in place the right regulations for your country, you will win. And that's the only formula for our continent, but we have to do it now. We've been talking about this for a long time. That's probably the 30th panel I'm doing this year on AI in Africa. But now we need to move beyond talking to actually doing.
Yeah, and that's important. Speaking of the doing, Alex, I'm going to ask you this one. It's clear governments have a role to play. The private sector has a significant role to play, and as big tech, one can argue that you have a disproportionate influence and therefore a disproportionate responsibility around making sure that AI is ethical, is responsible, is inclusive. Can you talk a bit about how Google is using AI to drive, or is driving, the ethical, responsible, and inclusive use of AI to solve everyday problems on the continent?
Look, I think, I think I alluded to this earlier, and that was a great answer, Kate, even though you used the wrong AI tool. Anyway.
We're using Google.
Look, I think that the ways that we're doing this to make sure that we're on the ground is to make sure that we are using data that's relevant and representative of what Africa is about. Having two AI research centers on the ground doing work related to health. 800 women every single day on this continent die from maternal health issues because they don't have access to ultrasound to understand how their pregnancy is going, right?
Preventable.
Us working on a point of care, easy to use, cost effective, handheld ultrasound machinery, you leveraging AI is critical to that, right? The work that we're doing with building data sets, which enables you to be able to use satellite and AI to pinpoint hard-to-reach buildings in remote areas, and whether it's in really townships or wherever, that can help you actually map and understand how do you deliver resources, how do you plan for those sort of environments, whether it's an electricity flow, water sanitation, helping governments do that. That's already happening on the ground. So for us, that's how we are responsible, is making sure beyond all the safety nets that we put in place in terms of how we build and test and ensure that we are doing all we can to mitigate any risk. But on this continent, and what's important is that we're on the ground through our AI research, we're on the ground. We now have engineers in our product development center that we've invested in Kenya, building solutions that are relevant and that solve for Africa's challenges, while at the same time solving for the world, right? Because again, our engineers are going to be the engineers that solve for the world for tomorrow. So that's how we're being responsible in a lot of ways. But as mentioned earlier, the critical piece is still going to be that team sport, that partnership with us and other tech companies and government to make sure that we have the right frameworks in place and that we're all playing our role in terms of being able to really capture this growth opportunity. We can't miss it. This AI revolution has to be the way that Africa gets to where it needs to get to without having it be years upon years, but actually some that we can shorten the timeline for.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of the timeline is fast and accelerating, and it's not waiting. And so your point around making sure that we don't miss the moment and that we don't fall behind, because it's going to become incredibly more and more difficult to catch up. And so the moment is now for all of us, I think, in various spaces of leadership to be very thoughtful and action-oriented. You were talking about how we spend a lot of time talking about it, but action-oriented. And maybe just a last one, Kate, from you. The big actions that you think you want to leave with this room, these are the absolute big actions we have to get right beyond the things we talk about.
Simple. Build the right compute infrastructure for your country, provide developers access to your data, support them, enable them, and see what happens. That's how Africa will move from becoming consumers of technology to actually builders for the world.
Alex, your view?
We need to have partnerships with government that have an openness to technology, understand the power it has to cater to our young people of the future who are now going to need opportunities, but also more importantly to propel the economic growth of our continent. So it's about the training and the skills that we need. It's about the framework that we need. It's about governments also being willing to adopt digital technology and also themselves reshaping how they operate. That I think are the ingredients for what we need to do moving forward. Thank you. Thank you.
I thank you both for a really good discussion. I thank you all. I think we've we've tried to traverse quite a large area in a very short space of time, but I think the opportunities are clear and visible. The ifs are where we need to focus with a bias for action to make sure that we capture the opportunity now while the opportunity is still ripe for this continent. Thank you all.